Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to episode 9 of Candid Reviews. So this review is on a book that has been very close to my heart and one that I have actually recommended to a few people just because I found it so impactful. So the book that I'm talking about is The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. So The Gifts of Imperfection was released in 2010 and was a New York Times bestseller and is written by researcher and speaker, and also author, obviously, Brene Brown. The book explores 10 strategies for what Brene calls living wholeheartedly. Now, this is a concept that Brene devised after years of research into shame, vulnerability, and self-worth. Wholehearted living has many aspects and nuances, but we can best understand this as a way of life that cultivates a feeling of worthiness. Now, fortunately for you all, I can't talk enough to cover all 10 strategies that are outlined in this book. But as usual, I will give you my top 3 takeaways that I enjoyed the most. Okay, now the first key takeaway is about cultivating worthiness. So Brene describes worthiness as the conviction that you are good enough as you are, flaws and all, and that you deserve to be loved. So put simply, it's the feeling of worthiness is having high self-esteem. So now that we know what worthiness is, the next question becomes, how can we actually cultivate worthiness? So Brene suggests that there are 3 values that you need to practice to increase your sense of worthiness. So these 3 values are, the first one being ordinary courage. Now, this is just about being brave enough to be vulnerable and honestly express who you are, how you feel, and what you've experienced. The second value is compassion. So this is just being kind to yourself and others. And the third value is connection. So this is building meaningful and fulfilling relationships with others by remaining open and judgment-free. Now, these 3 values are the gifts of imperfection that are referred to in the book's title. They are considered gifts because they come about only when you are actually willing to be vulnerable. Now, this is the idea that you develop the courage to accept that you're imperfect, and this allows you to connect with others because they empathize with your vulnerability. And finally, you become compassionate with others because you realize that nobody is perfect and you forgive their imperfections. So the second key takeaway is about shame and how it is a barrier to worthiness. So according to Brene, one of the main barriers to developing worthiness is shame. So based on her research, she defines shame as a feeling that you don't deserve to be loved because you'll never be good enough. It is built on foundations of fear and the sense that you are not enough. The best way to overcome shame and remove this barrier to worthiness is to develop what she calls shame resilience. Brene identifies shame resilience as being able to identify shame as it occurs and move past it in a healthy way that still protects your worthiness. A really good way to approach this is to talk it out with someone you trust about your feelings of shame and get an outside perspective on whether the thing that you have been triggered by is actually something you should be ashamed of. And the third key takeaway is about being yourself. So living wholeheartedly involves being and accepting your true and authentic self. So Brene describes being authentic as a way of thinking and acting. It is actively deciding to show your true self to the world. This means all of it, including the vulnerable parts like your fears, your imperfections, and your quirks. Now, when we act inauthentically, we are ultimately deciding that our true self needs to remain hidden, which reinforces the idea that we are fundamentally not good enough. Being authentic also means that we need to reject the need to compare ourselves to others. Yes, I know this can be easier said than done, but Brene notes that when you compare yourself to someone else, you actually end up abandoning any attempt to be and accept your true self because your focus is instead on winning in comparison to other people. The way to reduce the temptation to compare is by recognizing and celebrating your individuality and your awareness. Brene suggests that you can cultivate individuality through things like creativity. Realizing that nobody else has the same creative skill set as you do will highlight the part of you that is individual and incomparable. Now, to conclude this review, I just want to say that one of the biggest and most impactful messages that I have taken away from Brene Brown's work is that in order to connect with other people, you need to be vulnerable. And only after reading this book did I actually start working to create these deeper connections and relationships with others and myself. This is certainly no easy task, but it is something that is truly rewarding when you are successful. So throughout this book, Brene guides us through her research and her conversations with other people, and even shares her own stories of her journey to wholehearted living. Now, she believes that wholehearted living is revolutionary. Okay, a revolution might sound a little bit dramatic, but it is a bold act of resistance to choose authenticity and worthiness over shame and guilt. And this is because we are living in a culture of shaming ourselves and others. So there's never been a better time to engage with Brene's tenets for life. It's not an easy process, but to live wholeheartedly means to feel brave, afraid, but most importantly, alive. And it will be completely worth it. So I really hope that you enjoyed this review, and thank you for watching. See you next time.